Hello, it's another review, and this time a little ready to fly brushless quad. It is the Jumper X68. This is quite exciting because for a long time I messed with the tiny whoop style thing. This is the E010 brushed motors. It's okay round the house. It's a little bit gutless. You can't, do little freestyle things very easily. You need a lot of space because these motors sort of, if it drops, it like full throttle is like, Ugh. So this, I'm hoping, is going to be a more powerful indoor flyer. In the box, you get the little quad itself, which is super cute and very stylish. You notice there's no skew on this one. We seem to have a little linear antenna for the FPV, and this is the Free Sky model, which is handy. Also in the box is this little 350 mAh 1S battery with the mini lossy adapter, which is quite handy because that's what I use on brush quads as well. And also in this little bag we have this USB adapter which comes with this cable, which I presume somehow plugs into this. But the first issue I've got here is that is it as far as the box goes. No instructions once again. And if you go to this Jumper XYZ site, it's literally just some template that they haven't done the website yet. Fortunately, Banggood had some instructions on their website, so I was able to find out exactly where you'd plug the USB cable in, which is in here, under these screws. And I'm presuming it's the same to bind your radio, because there's supposed to be a receiver in there already, but all we've got on the bottom is dip switches for setting your VTX channel. So first thing to do is let's crack this open and get on with how we actually configure this in Betaflight and bind to the receiver. Join me down on the desk. Okay, well there's just two screws here and here to remove, so let's get those out now. And that section just lift off. Well, what we've got then is this socket which connects to camera is kind of in the way, so we need to take a pair of tweezers and just lift that out. Okay, so if we look at the board now, we see we've got the bind button here, so that bit's nice and easy. This is where the connector goes for the video signal, and here, pushed right up against the board, you can just see these 4 pins are for the USB connector, which is a bit of a crazy place, especially as not round a particular way. But having checked the polarity, I can tell you that the pins that are closest to connector are the ones that push up actually against the board. So let's try and get that in now, and it's not an easy thing to do. Okay, so it goes on like that, and as you can see we can't fit the connector for the camera at the same time, so let's hope we only have to go into Betaflight once to do this. But while I'm here, I used the power from USB to connect up the radio as well. Helpfully, the box actually tells us this is D8, so we know which mode to use. Okay, so I've got my model set up here. I've just copied it over from another quad, so it should be the same. Put it into D8 mode. So let's pop that into bind and see if we can bind this thing up. Hold down that button and power on. Well, seems to have gone green. Take out bind, power on. Well, I don't know if that green flashing light means it's bound or not, because there are no instructions. So let's connect it up to the computer anyway, because we need to look at that to see what the settings are, and I can double check if the radio is working at the same time. Okay, so here we are on Betaflight, so let's connect and get going. And I do notice that the accelerometer is just a little bit out, so it's flat on my desk at the moment, so let's just calibrate that quickly. Push that back to normal. It's a little bit off actually, never mind. So ports wise, we've just got a dedicated USB port. On the configuration Quad X, it's running DShot 300. It's running a ppm receiver rather than S-bus, which is quite interesting. An 8 kHz gyro update, 2 kHz PID. I'm not going to change any of this, I'm just going to see how it is. PID tuning wise, that's all fairly normal. I think I'll put a couple of profiles in here. And receiver wise, is my radio working? Yep, that's going okay, so I'll sort out my sub-trims there. Modes, it comes up with, looks like the armings on the stick, and it expects the auxiliary to be in acro by default, and then just angle setup. So let's just go into the CLI to see what version of Betaflight it's running. 3.16, nearly up to date. I don't think I can be bothered to update that right now. Interesting, it's running the Omnibus firmware. Normally we associate Omnibus boards with an inbuilt OSD. I don't think this has got one. I didn't see room for it on that tiny little board. But let me sort out all the bits. I'll add my normal modes in, so I'll have ARM and air mode. I'll just have angle and acro, I think, and I'll sort out my sub-trims on the receiver, and then I'll put it all back together and see what we've got. Join me in a second. So here I go for my first FPV flight, which I decided to do around the house. I actually start off here in acro mode, as this is what I'd normally fly in all my quads. In this quad, it feels a bit, it lolls around a bit. It doesn't quite feel as precise, so I actually flick back to acro, which feels a lot easier to fly indoors. Now, before I took this out for this little FPV flight, I did some just line of sight little hovers and little punches indoors to see what would happen, make sure it was, going to basically hover okay and be alright. And one of the props flew off, twice actually, just on one of the motors. They all fit a little bit loosely, I noticed. You can hold the motor and spin them quite easily. What I did, I just put just a dab of Yoo-hoo pour over the shafts, not to stick the props, but just to try and thicken the shafts up a little bit so they wouldn't be quite so loose. That seems to have done the trick here anyway. So as far as flying in the house goes, in angle here as we are, it's nice, it's very good, not a problem at all. It's almost the same as flying your normal sort of brush tiny whoop style, so it's nothing exciting. The only thing I'd say about this quad is its throttle is weird. If you see me going up and down a bit, it's because I can't seem to find the sort of midpoint on the throttle where it will stay still. Hover point's about 60%. And then after that, it's kind of a linear acceleration until you get near the top where it's very much faster. So the full throttle punch is more than your normal brushed. But up to that point, it's not that different. There's more power if you want it, but it's not blisteringly fast. It's kind of like you can rescue yourself from hitting the floor, but you're not going to be doing wild acro stuff indoors here. It will still lose height, and it still takes a little bit to recover. But yeah, overall, there's more to it. There's just not a huge amount. Signal-wise, I was getting a couple of low telemetry warnings, which could be the position of the antenna. It's kind of flat. Video signal's not bad. I mean, we're going through walls here, and it's only a tiny 25 milliwatt with just a little dipole. So it's kind of doing okay. And just finishing off my flight here, Sophie here actually just shouted, "Do you have a camera on that?" Like, no, I'm flying it in a different room, and I can't see where I'm going. That's where I would be more worried if I was you. But there you go. She's kind of used to it by now. So yeah, as far as this first flight went, I was pretty pleased. It's all okay, but I wanted to ramp things up a bit more and see what would happen. So I decided in the second flight, aside from bouncing around, as I'm back in acro now, just trying to get the things right, I thought I'd go out the window and I'd go see my wife who's in the garden. which is always interesting on these tiny little quads because you only need a slight breeze outside to get screwed up. And here's me getting all the throttle wrong, and eventually we sort of just about get outside the window, and then we're stuck kind of on the windowsill, and eventually we're out. And the radio starts chatting to me about low telemetry, and then I kind of get stuck on this trampoline here, and I'm a little bit worried that stuff's wrong, but Sophie shouts to me that it's all okay. So I decide to just take off from here again. Nothing wrong with the quad. Up we go. So yeah, pretty happy here, and I'm just pootling along. Going to see my wife. And that happens. Which is the prop flying off again. So I put that back on, and I figure, I know, I'll go for a couple of more sort of speed. Let's really ramp things up. So we go out here, and it's like, yeah, this is pretty quickly. I'm still having problems in this acro mode. It needs more tuning. So I come around here, I do a turn a little bit quick, and slam. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that small garden crash actually caused one of these struts to come away, but at the sort of rim end. That crash into the piano caused two of the struts to come away at the motor end. It's really quite weak here, and of course you've got all the weight of that motor and nothing supporting it. So what would have been like just a regular little crash, not a problem, carry on a regular brush quad, has broken this one quite badly. But I stick this back together and we go again. Sucker for punishment, me. So this time I'm pretty much just trying to do the same thing, making sure it works okay. Of course I've done some line of sight hovers and everything seems okay, even though the motors, I couldn't get it to stick at quite the right angle, but it seems generally okay. And I just really, what I want to do is try and get a feel for this thing as it flies, because so far my flying has been one indoor flights and then several crashes where I'm not really getting a feel for it, other than the fact that the throttle feels weird is the only thing I can tell you so far. So I really want to put, you know, sort of 10 lipos through this thing to try and work out how it is and how good it is. So the intention here is to do a bit of a mixed flight, a bit of indoors, a bit of outdoors. Just experimenting, really. But problems again, as I go over here and everything is fine, and then this happens. Now looking at that prop there, first I thought, the prop's come out, but the way it rolled indicates that the motor stopped on the other side. And if you look at this footage, you'll see that one of the motors isn't spinning anymore, and this basically happened in flight. And what happened was this little cable to the ESC has basically come off. I don't know if it's the fact that it became desoldered or happened in a crash or whatever, but yeah, it was pretty fragile the way it's on there, and it came off very easily. It's not particularly useful, of course, that the motors protrude out the bottom and are going to touch the floor, so any resistance you might get on the floor could be passed through to all sorts of things. I mean, this is not hard to strip down, but obviously slightly time consuming in terms of getting it down, getting the ESC line back on, and putting it all back together again. But hey, I persevered. I wanted to get a reasonable look at this thing. So all back together, and then I put another whole battery through, testing it with a couple of full throttle punches just indoors, and it all seemed good. And so we went out again and tried much the same thing, just a bit of a fly around. I thought I want to try and do a couple of flips here just to see how it is. I did some indoors and it was okay. There was a real timing thing to get in terms of punching it, going over, and getting right back on the power.
I think it would be easy to do, obviously with some more height and a bit more of an open area, but I've just got my garden here, so I thought let's see what happens. It's the worst that can happen. It's already happened. And a little bit quick there. One thing about these tiny little props and motors is of course how quickly they can speed up and get that power back on. It's a little bit of a technique to learn. It can be done then pretty easily once you get it. But as far as this flight was going, I was actually starting to think, oh, this is all right. I'm having a bit of fun here. You know, I'm just crashing into stuff, and it's not instantly breaking like it has done in the past. So you bounce into things, you crash a bit, you carry on. That's kind of the whole point of these things. They're supposed to be tough little things. I'm thinking I will get one of these rolls done if it kills me. This is something that's actually easier to get line of sight when you're first doing it, just to see how it reacts and how much space you have to recover from that drop. And I'm starting to think, oh, maybe I ought to take it just, you know, down a park or something, just so I can get a little bit more height to try this out. But it's kind of designed for sort of garden in the house, so felt like a bit of a weird thing to do. There you go, a bit of height helps. So I thought, oh, I know, I wanted to do that full throttle punch because it's really quite good right at the top end. If you get the throttle all the way, literally all the way up, then the climb's not bad. So I'm thinking actually that my battery's a bit low. Is it going to work very well? So trying to avoid the dog. I pop over here so I've got a good view of the house, so I know where I am. So let's go full throttle climb, and something's gone wrong here. It's suddenly lost power on one side. Not again.
So what's the deal this time? Notice that motor again? Not spinning. But this time there's no broken wires to the ESC. It looks like one of them's broken, the way it sort of twitches and stuff. But I went full throttle and then suddenly one of those ESCs stopped responding. I don't know if it's just blown, basically. But I've kind of had enough at this point. This is a product which has huge potential but is really quite flawed. Specifically, frame-wise, you've got these motors just in there with just these tiny struts. It's just too weak. If you look at the E010 frame, obviously you've got these things holding the brush motors in, but you've also got extra struts each side of these three things, and this material is stronger, so this whole thing is okay. That would withstand those little crashes I had, even quite big thumps, and it has done. I've put this on the ground loads of times and it's never had a single problem. This thing's fallen to bits. To go through the full list of problems on this one, first flight, this prop flew off. They're a bit loose in general, so you can fix that. That was just line of sight. When I landed it, my daughter said, "What's that on the floor?" And the lens had come off. It's just unscrewed itself. There was no tightness there, so I had to take this off and put a little bit of hot glue on once I got the focus in again. Obviously then the frame broke 3 times. Then the ESC wire came off and had to be resoldered. Then the ESC is blown completely as far as we can tell. So, to put it mildly, this doesn't really get my seal of approval, if that means anything. I haven't gone into, you know, stuff like these dip switches, which they've chosen not to give any documentation about. This LED, which is supposed to have some sort of frequency that can be used in lap timing, no documentation, no anything. Yeah, it could have been brilliant. When it flew, it was fine. A little bit more grunt than a brushed model, but not enormous, but I think it would have been fine. If it didn't have all these weaknesses and problems, it would have been great. But it did, and it wasn't, and I didn't like it. But hey, this is just me and my one. Now it might just be that I got the shonkiest ever version of this and everybody else is great. So if you're looking at this, I would encourage you to check out other reviews, see if anybody else had these problems, because you know, I can't base it on I've got one so 100% failure. That's a bit unfair, but check it out on other people. Thanks for Banggood anyway for sending it to me. I did work on it for about 4 days trying to get some decent flights out of it, but you know, it's broken and it doesn't particularly work very well. Other than that, it's fantastic. But there are of course links down below if you want to check this out, and you know, other better products on the Banggood website are there available for you. For now, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.